Welcome to Feminist Utopia, a community dedicated to envisioning and creating a more just society for all.
Welcome to Feminist Utopia. Today, in our utopia, school dress codes wouldn't unfairly target girls, especially girls of color.
And girls wouldn't be blamed for out of control male hormones and be shamed for their developing bodies. That's what our feminist utopia looks like. So obviously today we're going to delve into the dress code.
Yes, it's part of our back to school series. Going back to my childhood, I find dress codes to be one of the most prevalent examples of my otherness as a female in the classroom. And you did research, I did some research on how it came to be.
Yeah. Well, dress codes go back a very, very long way, obviously. Even in the 1700s, Black women in Louisiana were forced to wear head wraps because their elaborate hairstyles were considered a threat to society. Can you imagine a hairstyle being a threat to society?
Especially the hair of Black women.
Here's the root of the issue. Ever since African civilizations have arose, hairstyles have been used to indicate a person's marital status, religion, ethnic identity, wealth, and rank within the community. So the way you wear your hair tells something specific about who you are, where you come from, and what your status is. And white people were threatened by that. It was true in the 1700s in Louisiana, and it's also true that one of the first things that slave owners did was shave Africans' heads so they would lose their culture and their identity and their ties to their community.
That is so interesting because there's a very strong culture in ultra-Orthodox Judaism. When a woman gets married, she shaves her head. And she starts wearing a wig so she won't be attractive to others. Her hair is always covered, and part of it's like to be before God, but most of it is you don't want other men looking at you anymore because you are someone's property now. When you have slave owners shaving their new slaves' heads, it's a very similar dynamic. It's to erase you, it is to demean you, all these things.
Right. And that continued. The first Indian boarding school was founded in 1879 at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. They called it the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. It was a first off-reservation boarding school, and the whole idea was to civilize these Indian savages. And when I say Indian, I should qualify, I mean Native American Indians. And the first thing they did was shave these boys' heads, and they sought to eliminate the native cultural identity by requiring them to wear uniforms, shaving their head, changing their names, forbidding them to speak in their native languages, even to each other. And this Carlisle school was presented as a model for other schools around the country.
And it went around the world. They did a similar thing in Australia to their local Aboriginal communities. And they would put all these kids in together regardless of tribal affiliation because the idea was to wipe out all tribal affiliation, make them loyal to this new, better white savior society.
Right. So as long as there have been schools, there has been controversy over dress codes. And a lot of times, like we mentioned with African Americans and Native Americans, it was to try and erase their identity. But there were other more subtle forms of dress codes in early American settlers. They'd have a dress code at school requiring students to wear shoes, for example. And that was a class thing because if you could afford shoes, you were acceptable society, and if you couldn't, you weren't. Under the guise of being prepared for school, it was a way to separate the haves from the have-nots and exclude them from becoming educated.
Depriving people of education is a very powerful tool. Depriving them of their cultural heritage is a very powerful tool. These are all ways that white supremacy, patriarchy gain greater footholds in the minds of young people.
And I don't think very many people, when they think of a dress code, think of white supremacy or racism. But as we're going to find out here, they're inextricably linked. The first school dress code law was established in 1969 by the Supreme Court. It was a case, Tinker versus Des Moines Independent School District, and it came about during the Vietnam War when students wore black armbands to school to protest. And the court essentially decided that the schools can limit student expression by enforcing dress codes if there's a legitimate concern that the expression will be disruptive to the learning environment or violate the rights of others.
Well, disruptive to the learning environment's a nice little vague way of saying it's basically whatever we decide we want it to be.
Exactly. The American Civil Liberties Union says dress codes are legal as long as they do not treat boys and girls differently, force students to conform to sex stereotypes, or censor particular viewpoints. They're supposed to include protection for transgender, non-binary, gender, or any other students who may choose to dress in non-traditional ways. But I think in practice, most dress codes don't treat boys and girls equally.
No, it's funny because I talked to my mom. My mom's been dead for many, many, many years. She graduated from high school in the early 50s. And I was entering high school and I was able to wear jeans to school for the first time because I had attended an Orthodox Jewish day school where I had to wear skirts. And my mom was telling me how lucky I was because she grew up in Chicago and she wasn't allowed to wear anything other than skirts to school. So when it was really cold out, she would put on jeans, walk to school, and change as soon as she got there. And she got written up more than once, got demerits, and had to go do detention because she walked into the school in jeans when it was 15 degrees out. And so is that being treated fairly? No. No, it's not. But I distinctly remember my mom telling me how lucky I was that I was going to be able to wear jeans when it was cold.
Wow. I suppose they had to wear nylons, but that's not quite the same thing as far as warmth.
If anything, I think nylons make it worse. I remember it felt like the wind would cut right through those.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. It made my legs colder. It didn't make sense.
There are a lot of current controversies. The website change.org says it's hosting more than 400 open petitions against individual school dress codes. And the majority of those petitions have been started by the students, and they assert that their school's dress codes are sexist or unfairly enforced. Most schools claim that dress codes prevent in-class distractions, create a workplace-like environment, reduce pressures based on socioeconomic status, and deter gang activity. But I don't believe that's supported by the research.
It's one of those things that you feel should be true, but it simply isn't. And the data is out there. And as we get into discussing uniforms, for example, one of the weirdest things I learned during the research for this was that uniforms don't reduce bullying. If anything, it actually increases when uniforms are in place.
If you are in a disadvantaged family that can't afford to replace uniforms as kids grow really quickly, you can't easily go to Goodwill or another thrift store and find reasonably priced uniforms that fit. You are forced to keep your kids in uniforms that are ill-fitting until you can afford to purchase new uniforms. And so they're either way too big or way too small. There might be a sweet spot in there for a week or two and they actually fit, but I think it does bring more attention onto the students that are economically disadvantaged.
It's not just girls that are disadvantaged by dress codes. As we know, there are dress codes regarding what kind of straps a girl could wear and removing a girl for wearing leggings unless she's a size 0. That was in South Carolina.
They actually put size 0?
size 0 through 2.
Oh my gosh.
If you're bigger than a 2, this school principal decided that it was a distraction to have someone who is, quote, fat, end quote, in leggings in the classroom.
It just doesn't make sense. I mean, especially now in the Me Too era, there's national concern over sexual harassment, and it does seem that dress codes sexualize and objectify girls in a way that is unfair. We worry about what message is a dress code sending to girls. Your body is a problem. Don't distract the boys.
And that's funny because it reminds me of when I was getting the purity talk in my Jewish day school. So this was around 12 or so. And we were told that we were so attractive to the boys, basically absolving the boys. They can't help themselves. But if they see your ankles, that can be an attraction. So we had to wear skirts with these tights on underneath. Then we had to wear socks over the tights to double cover our ankles, then our shoes.
Wow.
And I had to do gym in that outfit. I got to change the shoes. I had to wear dress shoes, and then I could change into tennis shoes. We had to watch this film strip video. Remember those film strip? Ding!
Oh, yep, I remember those.
And it was a record of a rabbi. It was supposed to be a young, hip rabbi. And he's talking about, isn't it awesome? Isn't it fantastic that I am still attracted to a woman's ankles, something so simple. And so she needs to protect that.
That just sounds creepy.
So it really stuck with me that a guy could be attracted to my ankles.
Well, I mean, even a bare shoulder is a distraction. There's some dress codes that require girls to cover their collarbones. And we're still judged. That shirt shows too much cleavage. The skirt is too short. Yeah, she's too big to be wearing those leggings. And all of those comments send a message to girls that your body is a problem. That hurts their self-esteem and influences their ability to learn and be confident in the classroom. It is unfair to shift the blame from boys' raging hormones to the girls. Like it's their responsibility.
Well, I was also taught that my menstrual cycle made me dirty, so like there's a lot of stuff tied up in that. It was an excessive dress code thing, but one thing that the research has shown is that just as this damages all girls, including young white girls, these punishments for violations of these dress codes comes down disproportionately on girls of color, specifically Black girls and Hispanic girls.
Right. So the application of the dress code is unfair in that it does tend to single out young minority girls of color. They also are losing critical class time as a punishment for what they're wearing. There was a study done in 2017 from the University of Kentucky that found that Black girls make up 16% of the girls in the U.S. public schools, but accounted for 42% of girls' expulsions and more than a third of the girls' school-based arrest.
Wow.
So these girls are getting expelled and sent home and shamed for wearing leggings or having a bra strap showing.
Or not having their hair right.
Right.
We like to think that that stopped, but we're still hearing stories coming out of Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi about Black girls and Black women in the workplace even are told that their hair isn't, quote, right, especially if they're wearing it in a natural hairstyle.
Right. And the message that is being sent is that what you look like is more important than what you learn and think. No girl should ever have to forfeit her education because she has a hole in her jeans or her shirt is the wrong color.
I find this to be so disturbing in large part because the white patriarchy invests so much effort in telling Black Americans they're not doing it right. and they need to get an education. But meanwhile, we're going to kick your daughter out of class because she had a blue shirt on. We think that blue shirt's affiliated with something.
Right.
Or we didn't like her hair that day. I'm disturbed at the core of my soul that we try to make sure that kids can't get an education. If my kid wants to show up in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, no one cares because he's a guy, and that's a whole other thing. So it's not the clothes that keep him learning, right? The clothes aren't preventing these kids from learning.
Right.
It's about the sexualization of young girls and the hypersexualization of girls of color.
Right. In every state in the country, Black girls are more likely to be suspended than their white peers. Every state. And teachers have biases against these children and are more likely to discipline girls of color for minor offenses and are more likely to give them harsher punishment. So you have these dress code policies that are just another example of a hostile school environment and experience for girls of color, for trans girls, for girls living in poverty, and then you wonder why they drop out.
And then you blame them for dropping out, is what the white patriarchal culture does. It blames them.
Right.
It goes back to the school to prison pipeline, and maybe we should have Deanna on soon. She has a lot of information about that and how, again, it's part of the white patriarchy that is designed to disincentivize Black children from school.
Right. It just makes me angry thinking about it. But, dress codes aren't great for guys either. I mean,
that's true.
Boys are seen as just these monsters that can't keep their hormones in check and suggests that they don't have the ability to be next to a female student without going crazy.
Ankles. Ankles make a guy crazy. It's a way to absolve what is part of rape culture. Like Brock Turner's dad said, well, why should he be punished for getting 20 minutes of action for raping an unconscious woman in an alley?
Right. And dress codes are just part of that same message. It leads to the blame women and girls who are victims of sexual assault. Like, what was she wearing? Was she asking for it? Was her skirt too short? Or this is all a part of society blaming women for what they're wearing. And it starts in schools with the dress code. And little girls learn that it's their responsibility to control the men's reactions.
Yeah, it runs so deep. And like you said, it starts in school, but it goes so far beyond school. And it's not just America. In case someone's ever worrying that I despise patriarchy only in the United States, no. I don't like it anywhere. Saudi Arabia and Iran are best known for their oppressive dress code cultures of women being fully covered and having to have their heads covered. Someone we know is a refugee from Iran. She had to have her hair covered. If her hair was peeking out, then she could get taken away and beaten, literally. And in Saudi Arabia, women are supposed to be covered from head to toe to the point where there's often vitamin D deficiencies in women.
Some of them are required to wear even the veil.
Yes.
It's like a hood with a little fabric peephole through it. Whether it's Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, or whatever religion, what is considered appropriate attire for women in public is dictated by rules that are written by men.
Yes.
By and large, the logic that they use for these social norms and dress codes stem from the philosophy that just being able to lay their eyes on a certain part of a woman's body is reason enough for men to get turned on.
And it's the woman's fault that they're turned on. It goes back to original sin, is how it was explained to me. Eve tempted Adam with the apple, and showing off my ankles was showing the boys in my school an apple. I was trying to tempt them into sin by existing in that space.
It might not be ankles now. It's probably more shoulders, but it's equally as ridiculous.
We never had sleeveless gear. To this day, I don't wear things that are sleeveless. It just feels so weird.
But here's the kicker. Dressing modestly, we all know, does not help women escape becoming an object of sexual gratification in the eyes and minds of men.
Yes.
You look at, I think there is a website or a hashtag or something called What Was She Wearing? And it's pictures of outfits that women were wearing when they were raped. And they run the gamut from jeans and hooded sweatshirts to full length dresses. Or, I mean, there's no relation between what the woman is wearing and the sexual violence that she is subjected to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of viral things, there's been this thing going around Facebook. You post the picture and it says, when was the first time and what age you were when you realized that a man was sexualizing you? People post answers, and some people are really mad about the answers. People get mad that mine was 11, for example. The dress codes go back to that, and none of that stuff that we were told would protect us works. Like you said, I could be wearing hoodie and jeans, and they'll find some other reason to blame me.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe like that young woman who was wearing a thong underneath her jeans and her hoodie, and the defense used that as an excuse that she must have been out looking for it because she was wearing a thong underneath her pants.
It's just so frustrating, and it makes me angry, and I would love to be able to live in my feminist utopia where that wouldn't happen.
Yes.
One thing I came across in my research that I thought was really interesting was in France. They have gone so far to acknowledge that men have so little control over their biological urges that they have installed urinals in the streets of Paris. They're eco-friendly, open-air, completely exposed urinals on the pavements in places with known public urination problems.
Public urination problems. So they waited until the guys made a habit of pissing there to put in a urinal. It's like what I do when I'm trying to litter train a cat. Oh, the cat really likes to go there. That's where I'm putting the litter pan.
Well, yeah, I guess I took it more like there's nothing for women. So women obviously have the capacity to control their bladders and reach a restroom, but men aren't able or capable to do the same?
Evidently not.
It's just another statement that public space is owned by men and there's no room for women.
If I ever go back to Paris, I think I'm just going to go kick one over if I can or something. I'm really mad now.
And you're not the only one. Feminist protesters have been pointing them out and, not surprisingly, focusing on how sexist it is.
So, we like to end on an up note. So we have 2 action items this week. The first one is to find out what your local school dress code is, even if you don't have kids in the school. And that's what I did today. I went to the Seattle City Schools and downloaded their public dress code. The boys was like a page and a half. The girls in woke Seattle was 4 pages.
That's insane.
And people here think they are the wokiest McWokey people ever. They think people in Portland are regressive. So that was my action item.
Yeah, and you also found an organization to check out called the National Youth Rights Organization, and it's just youthrights.org. They have student-led initiatives and projects that they're working on, and they also have dress code policies that they are discussing, and the change comes from the students. So that's an interesting place to get an idea of what's going on and what students' perspective is. And they also have other initiatives like voting and curfews. And it's just kind of an interesting organization to research and support.
So with that, we wish you a very good August week ahead of you. I hope it's not too hot where you are.
Thank you for hanging out. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much for joining us today at Feminist Utopia. If you like our work, please give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you access our podcasts so others can find it as well. You may also become a Feminist Utopia patron at patreon.com to show your appreciation. Remember, patrons get perks.
And check out our blog and other resources at our website, feministutopia.net. Email us your idea of what a feminist utopia would look like or any questions to info@feministutopia.net. We appreciate you taking the time to listen and grow with us. Feminist Utopia is created by Debbie Williams and Benita Malone.